Willie Nelson.
On the road again, I just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends, and I can't wait to get on the road.
He moved to Nashville in 1960 when he was 27 years old. But before moving to Nashville, Willie had moved to just about every major city in his home state of Texas. He had moved to California and Washington State, and then back to Texas, trying to find a foothold in music. He had been writing songs ever since he could remember being alive, but sitting still in one place had never been for Willie. So he traveled from city to city, singing and playing anywhere he could. But he had finally started having some success with his songwriting when Claude Gray took Willie's song called Family Bible up to number 10 on the country charts in 1960.
But the family Bible on the table will ever be my key to memory.
Now, Willie had also started getting feedback and encouragement from other people in the music business that convinced Willie it was finally time to take that big jump. It was time to move to Nashville. Now, Willie showed up without any contacts or even much of a plan. His thought was he was good enough to write good songs, other people had told him so, and he thought Nashville would realize that soon enough. Well, he would find out that breaking into Nashville wasn't quite that easy. Now, Willie first started taking his songs around to different studios. People listened, but they didn't buy. A nod, a handshake, a thanks for bringing this by, but no takers. It went like this for weeks until, before long, Willie was selling encyclopedias door to door, trying to make money to survive. Now, eventually, he did get hired to a songwriting contract where his job was to sit in a room and write and write and write until he wrote a hit. Now, sitting still was torturous for Willie, but he did eventually write that hit. The song he wrote was called Hello Walls, and it was recorded by Farron Young, who released it in 1961 and took it to number 1 on the country charts.
Hello, walls. Hot things go for you today. Don't you miss her? Since she up and walked away, and I'll bet you.
Now, one place that Willie visited often in Nashville was Tootsie's Orchid Lounge down on Broadway beside the Ryman Auditorium. Now, at Tootsie's, writers would sit around and play their songs to each other, getting feedback and criticism along the way. Sometimes it was tough love, but at least it was love, and if your song was good enough, the writers would tell you that. Hey there, thanks for watching. If you would you take a second to like this video and subscribe to my channel? I'm really trying to get the Stories of Country Music YouTube channel going, and the first part is the hardest because YouTube wants to see some interaction before they'll promote the video even more. So if you would, real quick, like the video and subscribe to my channel, I sure would appreciate it. Thank you. Now, one night, Willie was down at Tootsie's playing some songs when Charlie Dick, Patsy Cline's husband and manager, heard one that he liked so much that he wanted Patsy to hear it immediately. Although it was 1 a.m., Charlie dragged Willie into the car and they headed to Patsy's house. Now, Willie had never met Patsy Cline, and seeing how it was 1 o'clock in the morning, Willie didn't just want to walk into her house. But Charlie insisted, went in and woke up Patsy, told her he had a hit song he wanted her to listen to, and then came down and got Willie. Now, Patsy Cline eventually recorded Willie's song and took it to number 2 in 1961. That song was called Crazy.
Crazy, I'm crazy for feeling so lonely.
Of all of Willie's songs that were ever recorded by other artists, Willie says that Patsy Cline's version of Crazy is his absolute favorite. And the songs kept coming for Willie. In 1961, Billy Walker recorded one of my personal favorite Willie Nelson songs called Funny How Time Slips Away.
Gee, ain't it funny how time slips away?
Funny How Time Slips Away went to number 23 on the country charts. Now, after having been in Nashville a little over a year, things were finally going well enough for Willie Nelson. He was making a living writing music, something he had always wanted to do. He was rising in the ranks of songwriters in Nashville, and it looked like Willie could keep writing in Nashville and have a long-lasting career as a country music songwriter. But Willie didn't want to be just a songwriter, and the chances of him spending the rest of his life sitting in writing rooms was absolutely zero. Willie was a wanderer at heart, and he needed to be on the road. So he started playing bass with Ray Price and the Cherokee Cowboys. This got Willie out on the road again, and he could write more songs and hopefully get signed to his own recording contract. And soon, he did sign his first recording contract with Liberty Records. In 1962, Willie released this song called Touch Me, which went to number 7 on the country charts.
So touch me, and you'll know how you'd feel with the blues.
Willie was finding success both as a songwriter and a recording artist. It seemed that after 2 short years in Nashville, Willie Nelson was on his way to becoming a star. But things weren't going to happen that easily. In fact, they weren't going to happen in Nashville at all. Willie kept writing, and he kept touring, and he kept recording, releasing an album a year over the next 10 years. But he wouldn't have another top 10 hit for another 13 years, all the way out in 1975, after he had moved to Austin, Texas. So why did Willie not find success in Nashville when he clearly had what it took to be a national superstar? Well, so much of success in the music business is timing and working with the right people at that right time. And usually, people don't know that the timing is just right and the people around them are right until, well, success actually happens. There's no formula and no blueprint to follow. Success is always more than luck, but luck does play some part in it. Willie's biggest problem in Nashville was that the record producers kept trying to get the sound they wanted to hear instead of letting Willie sound like Willie. Liberty Records would release 2 albums from Willie, but then they would get out of the country music business, and Willie was left without a label. Fortunately for Willie, the famed guitar player and producer of RCA, Chet Atkins, came calling. And so Willie signed with RCA in 1975. The problem with Willie and RCA was that Chet pushed Willie, and all his other artists, to sound like the other mainstream country artists, in what was known as the Nashville sound. Now, this sound consisted of big orchestras and stringed instruments and big choir backup singers. But this sound just didn't suit Willie. Willie isn't a polished performer with a big, full, wide-ranging voice. Willie doesn't aim for the over-the-top productions and the lofty high notes. Willie does, and always has, played best when it was him and his guitar. Just simple, down-to-earth music with the melody and lyrics carrying much of the attention.
So don't cross him, don't boss him. He's wild in his sorrow and he's riding, and he's hiding his pain. Don't fight him, don't spite him. Just wait till tomorrow. Maybe he'll ride on again.
Now, Willie says in Nashville, he would walk into a studio and see a chorus of backup singers standing there, and he knew immediately that his sound was going to be hijacked. It was almost as if he were defeated before he even started. So pretty much every RCA album for Willie was a bust. None of them sold well, and none of his singles made it into the top 10. Most never even made it into the top 20. It wasn't until the early 1970s, when Willie was almost 40 years old, that things changed. For one thing, his house in Nashville burned down, forcing him to decide if he wanted to stay in Nashville. He did rebuild his house in Nashville, but he already knew by that time he wanted to move back home to Texas. Also, in 1972, RCA and Willie couldn't agree on contract terms, so Willie left RCA and signed with Atlantic Records under his terms. And those terms were clearly stated that he had absolute control over his songs and how they were recorded. Now, these changes, along with an experience called the Dripping Springs Reunion, just outside Austin, Texas in 1972, propelled Willie to land his first of many #1 hits. The first was in 1975 with this song called Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain.
In twilight, though I see her.
After leaving Nashville, Willie would go on to start the outlaw movement in country music, had more than 10 #1 hits, and win the Entertainer of the Year award in 1979. But that's a story for another day.